So chapter 21 is about the anatomy and physiology of the lymphatic system and the immune system. So we'll study about the anatomy of the different structures and organs that are included in the lymphatic system. We'll study what lymph is. We'll study the different lymph organs. And then we'll move on to the special cells that is responsible for specific defense in our body and non-specific defense. So some of these cells are B cells and T cells and antibodies. And we'll study how our immunity develops once we are exposed to a foreign pathogen like a bacteria or virus. So here's a picture of the lymphatic system. And you can see all these vessels that are shown in green. And then immediately we are reminded about the cardiovascular system, arteries and veins, right? So the lymphatic vessels that are shown here, they go side by side with the arteries and veins. So it is made up of lymph. Lympha means water. So inside these lymphatic vessels, you'll have a substance called lymph with special cells called lymphocytes. So lymph is very similar to chemistry as plasma of blood, but it does not have all the proteins though. So we have lymphocytes, and then we have all these lymph organs that make up the lymphatic system. So here you can see some of the important organs here. So the organs of the lymphatic system are thymus. See here, it's right on top of the aortic arch, thymus. We have tonsils in the oral cavity here. Tonsils, thymus. We have the spleen right under the diaphragm, above on the side of the stomach. The fundus of the stomach, you'll see the spleen. And then studded all through the respiratory tract and the digestive tract, we have something called mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. They are protective in function. And then the nodes, the lymph nodes is where the filtration of the blood plasma is going to happen. So you can see concentration of lymph nodes in the cervical region and then under the armpits in the mammillary region. There's some clusters in the groin area. So these are all the locations where we would see the lymph nodes. So this chapter, this is what we are going to be studying. We'll be studying the structure of the lymphatics. We'll study the different organs, and we'll study how they function as filtration of blood to clean out the bacteria and virus and other toxins in blood. So the lymphatic system plays a huge role as overlap of the circulatory system, because in the capillary bed, not all of the plasma that left the blood will come back to the artery or the capillary bed. So there's a lot of spill over in the tissues. So what happens is the lymphatic system is going to suck up the spillage and then put it back in the venous system so that it enters the circulatory system. So everything you see in green are the lymphatic vessels. It has special lymphatic tissue and it has lymph. These are the organs. So in mucosa associated lymphatic tissue, there are special cells discovered by Mr. Pius. They're called Pius patches. The fluid in the lymphatic tissue is called lymph. Lympha means water. So it's nothing but interstitial fluid that did not go back into the capillary bed. Very interesting, just it is a one-way system to the heart. See, it doesn't have a pump. So it's kind of a little similar to veins, but there is no pressure at all. It's so it has to take the lymph back to the venous system just by the valves and the milking action of the muscles. So the pressure inside the lymphatic vessel is very low. It is a one-way system. And then it harbors, it has all the immune cells. So what happens is, as the lymph flows through the nodules or these organs, it will be cleaned up. So it's like a little a nursery of B cells and T cells that we'll study soon, that is going to filter the lymph so that our blood is pure. See, this is very interesting. We recycle up to 2 liters of lymph back to the cardiovascular system. So if there is a blockage, just think about it. If there's a blockage, what can we expect? There'll be an accumulation of fluid in the tissue. So it's very important. So a blockage is called lymphedema. And it's a very common disease, lymphedema, when there is a blockage in the lymphatics. So let's look at the 3 main functions of the lymphatic system. So if it is going to suck up all the interstitial fluid that didn't go back to the capillary, right? It's going to like suck up like a vacuum, like that. And it's going to suck it up and then put it back to the venous system. And here you can see lymphedema where there was a blockage and there's an accumulation of tissue. So this is a clue that it plays a huge role in the liquid balance in our body. The blood volume plays a huge role in blood volume and returning the extra fluid back to blood. It has all these special cells, immune cells. So it plays like B cells and T cells and natural killer cells. So if there are any foreign invaders that have entered the body, it will try and kill it off. It's the policeman, it's the patrol of our body. And the third most important fact is that it also plays a role in fat absorption. So there are these lymphatics in the digestive tract. So they are called lacteals. They are going to absorb the fat from the diet and then it will put it right back into the blood. So 3 main functions. It plays a role in fluid balance of our body. It plays a role in the immunity of our body, protecting us from pathogens, bacteria, virus, toxins, all of those things, cancer too, and then absorption of fat. I was reading an article about the lymphatic system, and I thought this quote was so interesting. The lymphatic system is essentially your body's sewage processing plant, which is responsible for removing the waste, toxin, and pathogens, and it flushes it out of your body. And it's so very well said. We don't think about our lymphatic system until, of course, we fall sick. It's a very important system in our body. Like when you're driving down the road, and let's say it was raining, and then most of the rain will go back to the Connecticut River here. And then we have the water treatment plants where they are purified, and then it's the water cycle. So what happens to the water that went down the drains? That is kind of like your lymphatic system. It is going to the sewage processing plant where it is purified, and then we reuse it. All right. So this picture is showing the organization of the lymphatic tissue. So this capillary bed you are familiar with. So from the heart is pumping the blood, and then the high pressure blood, we had these different types of arteries, muscular distribution, arterial, and then it becomes a capillary bed. So in the capillary bed, we are exchanging nutrients. So all the nutrients and oxygen will leave the capillary bed, and then we pick up carbon dioxide and waste, and then it goes back to the heart through the venous system. So in the capillary bed, there is a little bit of spillover. Not all the blood plasma is going to go back into the capillary bed. So all the spillover that is hanging around in the interstitial tissue will enter the lymphatic capillary, which would be the finest capillary. And the lymphatic vessels, just like veins, they will have a lot of valves to prevent backflow, so low pressure. So as it encounters a lymphatic node, this is where the filtration happens. So this is the nursery for B cells and T cells. They will clean out. And then there are certain junctions that you'll see later it becomes thicker and thicker. It becomes the lymphatic trunk, and then the trunk will become the thickest lymphatic duct, and then it goes back to the heart. So this is a closed circuit. See, it starts as a blunt tube. It's a closed circuit. The chemistry of lymph is very much like plasma, but it's missing some of the large plasma proteins. But it does have other proteins, salts, glucose, fats, water, and white blood cells. Lymph capillaries are the smallest. They will encounter a node where they will be filtered. The larger ones are called trunk, and then all the trunks run together to form the lymphatic duct. So this is the histology of a lymphatic vessel. So you can see how the lymphatic vessels are intertwined with the arteries and veins. It's shown in green here. So you can recognize the artery and you can recognize the vein, and then the green ones are the lymphatic vessels. The beginning of the lymphatic vessel is a blunt tube. So it has a lumen. It has all the three layers that you studied in the cardiovascular system: intima, media, and externa. And it has a lot of valves also to prevent backflow. It's kind of like, reminds me of a cul-de-sac road. It starts as a blunt end. But the most interesting thing is, see, if you look at the single layered endothelial cells, it's simple squamous epithelium. And then these cells, they open one way, like a trap door, the door that goes to your attic. So what happens is, because of pressure difference, the extracellular fluid that did not enter the capillary will enter the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic will have a lot of valves. So see here, this GIF is showing how the valves are making sure there's no backflow, and it's pushing the lymph up to the duct. And in a cross section, you can see how the lumen of the lymphatic is very, very irregular. So here's an artery, a vein, and a lymphatic. So the main difference between cardiovascular vessels and the lymphatics is that it's starting out as a blunt tube. It has a larger diameter and it's very thin walled. It has a very irregular lumen. So the endothelial cells, they overlap like shingles on a roof, and they can only open one way. It's like a trap door. So by pressure difference, the leftover interstitial fluid will push it and come inside the lymphatic, and then it will go up the lymphatic vessels. So the lymph moves in the lymphatics by the milking action of the muscles. Here's a picture of a lacteal. So the lacteals are lymphatic vessels that are found in your small intestine. So what these lacteals do is, it will absorb fat from your diet, and then it will take it to the blood supply directly. So it is a special lymphatic capillary in your small intestine, and lymph with fat is called chyle. So we'll talk about lymph nodes, which are very, very important. So in our lecture, So chapter 21 is the anatomy and physiology of the lymphatic system and the immune system. So we'll study the structure and function of the lymphatic vessels, lymphatic organs and tissues, and we'll talk about how they play a huge role in mediating the immune system of your body. So all the vessels you're seeing here in green are the lymphatic vessels. They go side by side with the arteries and veins. So when you say lymphatic system, it is overlapping with the cardiovascular system because not all the blood that flows through the capillary bed end up back in the venous system. There's a lot of spillover. So the lymphatic system is like a vacuum cleaner. It's going to suck up the fluid in the tissue and it will put it back in the venous system. So it is made up of lymph, which is the liquid part, very similar in chemistry like blood plasma. It has special cells called lymphocytes that will play a role in your immune system, and then lymphatic vessels and lymphatic tissue. It starts with tonsils in your oral cavity, thymus in the mediastinum, spleen, mucosa associated lymphatic tissue in your intestines and respiratory tract, and also the appendix. And then you can see there's clusters of lymph nodes. So lymph nodes are like little filters. They're going to filter the blood and purify the blood. Lympha means water. It is a one-way system to the heart. So it doesn't have a pump. So it'll have a lot of valves to prevent backflow. So we return about 2 liters of lymph to the cardiovascular system every day. So anytime there's a blockage, then there'll be a accumulation of fluid in the tissues, which is very bad. So the functions of the lymphatic system is fluid balance in the body. So it is going to suck up the interstitial fluid, purify it, and put it back in the venous system. So here's a picture of lymphedema that you might have seen when there is a blockage in the lymphatic system. So it plays a huge role in blood volume and fluid volume in our body. And because the lymph nodes and has a lot of lymphocytes in it, like B cells, T cells, they play a huge role in the immunity of your body. And then very interesting is how they play a role in fat absorption. So there's something called lacteals in your intestine that is going to, so these lymphatic capillaries are going to absorb fat from your diet and it will take it and decant it into the venous system. Fluid balance, immune system, and then absorption of fats. 3 main functions. See, this quote is saying lymphatic system is like a sewage processing plant in your body. So it is responsible for removing all the toxic waste and flushing all the toxins in our body. So it is so important for health. So here's the organization of the lymphatic tissue. So in the capillary bed, you would see the very fine lymphatic vessels that have valves to prevent backflow, and they'll all run into a lymph node. And then all the nodes will collect into a larger lymph trunk. And then it becomes a lymph duct, and then it is going to decant. It's going to pour all the contents into the venous system. Lymph is very similar in chemical composition like plasma, but it doesn't have some of the main proteins. It does, however, have a lot of salts and glucose, all your lymphocytes and water. So here's a histology, a close-up look at the lymphatic system. So you can see how the lymphatic vessels are intertwined with the arteries and veins. So not all of the blood from the interstitial fluid is going to go back into the artery and vein, the plasma. So all the spillover will be sucked up by the lymphatic vessels, like a vacuum cleaner. So it is closed. So it starts as a closed tube. It is made up of one layer of endothelial simple squamous cells. And you can see how the interstitial fluid is going to enter the lymphatics because of pressure difference. So this is like a trap door. It is described as the shingles on a roof. So it opens, it's like a trap door, like your attic drawer that opens only one way. So the interstitial fluid will flow into the lymphatics and it will be pushed up the lymphatic vessels. And the valves will make sure there's no backflow. So it has all the three layers that we studied in an artery and vein. But the lumen, you can see here, it's highly collapsed because the pressure is very low. So the lymph will move up through the milking action of the vessels. This is a picture of lacteals. So this lymphatic capillary will absorb the fat in your diet. And then when it has fat, it is called a chyle. So it is going to transport the fat from the digestive tract to the thoracic duct. So they are called lacteals. So here's a picture of a lymph node. See, if it gets infected, it will be swollen. And then here you can see the distribution of all the lymph nodes. So as the lymph flows through this node, it will get filtered. See this picture on the lower right here. So here, this is a picture from 5 years ago. It was only recently discovered that there's a very rich supply of lymphatic vessels in the brain also. They proved it. So we have about 500 to 600 lymph nodes scattered all over the body. They are like shaped like a lima bean. And they are found in clusters. There's this cluster in your neck, under your armpit, and in your digestive tract, in your groin region. So they can be found in clusters in our body. And they can get rid of 99% of the foreign invaders of pathogens in your body. Lymphadenopathy is enlargement of the lymph node because of infections. Sometimes they will remove the lymph node. For cancer too, when there's breast cancer, the lymph nodes in the axillary region here will swell up and it can be palpated. This is very interesting. See, this picture is showing the distribution of drainage in a body. So everything in purple is drained by the right lymphatic duct that is going to decant into the right subclavian vein. So this part of the body is drained by the right lymphatic duct. Whereas the left side of your body, your head, your arms, your left thoracic region, and the entire lower torso is drained by the thoracic duct that is draining into the left subclavian vein. So you see this uneven distribution of drainage of lymphatics. In the junction, right where your xiphoid processes, there is a junction, a swelling of all the thoracic trunks, and that region is called cisterna chyli. So it's going to receive all the lymphatics from your lower torso. So it's called cisterna chyli. So now, where are the lymphocytes or the cells responsible for the immune system made? So the process of lymphocyte production is called lymphophoresis. It starts in the bone marrow. However, there are two pathways it can take. Some of them stay in the bone marrow and they mature in the bone marrow. So the hemocytoblast differentiates, takes the lymphoid pathway to make B cells or natural killer cells. See, B stands for bone marrow. So these are the cells that will ultimately make antibodies. The second pathway is a group of cells will migrate to the thymus, and then they will mature in the thymus. That's why they are called T cells. Lymphocytes make up only 30% of the WBCs. Lymphocyte synthesis is called lymphopoiesis. The lineage that matures in the bone marrow are called B cells and natural killer cells. The ones that move on to the thymus, migrate to the thymus, and they mature there, they are called T cells. So there are different types of lymphocytes. 80% of all the lymphocytes are T cells. There are 4 types of T cells. Cytotoxic T cells, they will attack foreign cells or cells infected by virus. Cytotoxic. Helper T cells will help B cells to make antibodies. Suppressor T cells will play a role in regulation of the immune cells. Memory T cells will hang around and have a memory. It's a subset of T cells that will respond to a previously encountered antigen. So it has a memory of that infection. And if the same virus attacks the cell again, they will kill it. 10% of the lymphocytes are B cells. And B cells will differentiate into plasma cells that will make antibodies. Natural killer cells are another 5 to 10%. They are very important for targeting and identifying cancer cells and getting rid of them. So we'll see like where these B cells and T cells are hanging around in the lymphatic tissue. So this picture is very important. It will be on your lab test. So here's a lymph node. All the artery lymphatics that's bringing in the lymph are called afferent vessels. So this capsule is connective tissue capsule that is shown in green. It is rich in collagen and elastin. And then the center is all reticular tissue in the inside. The capsular tissue will dip into the nodule, making all these partitions. It is called trabeculae. So we have the capsule. Right underneath, we have the subscapular space. The outer part is called cortex. The inner part is called medulla. And when the clean lymph leaves the lymph node, it is called efferent vessel. Efferent. This region where you see the artery and vein and the lymphatic, see the indentation here is called as the hilum. So in the different regions, and then see the cortex, the medulla, and so forth, in different regions, we have a different population of lymphocytes. So for example, the subscapular space here, subscapular space contains macrophages and dendritic cell. The outer cortex is dominated with B cells. The deep cortex is dominated by T cells. The medulla contains B cells and plasma cells. So as the lymph flows through the lymph node, it will get filtered by these different types of cells. What I explained is rewritten in words. So that's why lymph nodes are called as a little filter of lymph. It's like it's filtering. The different T cells are going to clean up. So it comes in laden with toxins and then it leaves out clean. This is a picture of MALT, a mucosa associated lymphoid tissue. It is found in your digestive tract, respiratory tract, reproductive tract. So when there is bacteria or virus in the food that you eat, right, in your digestive tract, this will take care of it. So MALT refers to mucosa because there's a layer of mucus here, associated lymphoid tissue. They are dominated by lymphoid cells called Peyer's patches, who discovered them. So they will take care of bacteria in the environment. The other lymph organs are tonsils. There's 5 of them. So pharyngeal tonsil or adenoids found in the back of your throat. And here you can see the palatine tonsils. So they are the first line of defense. And then we have a pair under the tongues. They are called linguinal tonsils. So when we ingest food, there might be bacteria in it. So this is the first line of defense of any toxins that are entering the human body. So these are the 5 tonsils that's found in and around the oral cavity. Here's a picture of thymus that is found on top of the aortic arch in the mediastinum. You can see the lobular appearance of the thymus. So thymus is where T cells are going to mature. So this will have a cortex. It will have all these lobules that are separated by septum, and then it will have concentrations of T cells that are maturing. So once the T cells mature in the thymus, they will leave the thymus and enter the bloodstream. The thymus will disintegrate, slowly start to disintegrate after puberty, once the immune system is built up. So it's a nursery for T cells. Once they mature, they will leave the thymus and enter the bloodstream. The largest lymph organ is your spleen. So in a cross section of the abdominal region here, you can see the liver, you can see the stomach, and then there is a ligament, gastrosphenic ligament, that is keeping the spleen in place. It's right under the diaphragm, adjacent to the kidneys, adjacent to the left kidney. And then here you can see the hilus of the spleen, where the splenic artery and vein are going to enter. But the histology is what is so interesting. You can see something called white pulp, and you can see something called red pulp. White pulp is a concentration of lymphocytes that is going to fight off the bacteria and virus. Red pulp is the recycling of red blood cells. We studied that RBCs live only for 4 months, 120 days. So it's here. So that's why the spleen is called as the graveyard for RBCs. So it is going to it's going to break it down, and then it will recycle the iron. So the spleen is such a busy organ. It is the size of your heart actually. It's the same size as a closed fist. So important things here to note, it is the red pulp that is going to recycle RBCs when they are old, and white pulp which will initiate the immune response. So talking about the immune response, it can either be specific or non-specific. So the first line of defense of any microorganism that enters, or antigen that enters the body, is first line of defense. So your skin is first line of defense. The mucus layer is first line of defense. These are very non-specific. Or even the phagocytosis of the macrophages, the second line of defense, they're all non-specific. So the immune system can either be non-specific or it can be specific, which is the last line of defense. So we saw this picture when we studied blood. So in the bone marrow, we have stem cells called hematopoietic stem cells that is either going to take a myeloid pathway lineage to make the RBCs, platelets, and all the WBCs, neutrophils, eosinophil, basophil, and so forth. So that is the myeloid pathway. The lymphoid pathway is where it is going to make the lymphocytes. The B cells and the NK cells will mature in the bone marrow itself, whereas the T cells are going to mature in the thymus. And there are different types of T cells. So the myeloid pathway is the non-specific or innate immune system, whereas the highly sophisticated B cells and T cells that take the lymphoid pathway are adaptive or specific response. So our body's defense mechanism is either categorized as non-specific. So this is the first and second line of defense. It is not going to distinguish a pathogen uh, it's not going to distinguish if it's a bacteria, a virus, or a toxin. Whereas the specific defense is attack against a specific bacteria or virus. So this is the highly sophisticated one. So we'll briefly go over the first, second, and third line of defense. So here's the first line of defense. When we study the integumentary system, we saw how our skin, the largest organ in our body, is protecting us against the environment. So the environment is full of bacteria, viruses, fungal spores, toxins, that can harm our body. So it is protecting us. So the hair with its sebaceous gland and sebum is again protecting us. That is the first line of defense, making sure the invaders don't come inside the body. But let's say you got a cut and the invaders have entered the body, then it will be the second line of defense. The first person to appear on the site of infection would be the phages, macrophages, and neutrophils. And they are going to do phagocytosis and they will chop up the invader. Another way to defend would be the natural killer cells that are hanging around in the peripheral tissue. When they see an abnormal cell, they will poke holes in it and lyse it. Another way are called interferons, which are chemical messengers that are going to coordinate the destruction of the invader. Complement. They are circulating proteins that are going to activate the destruction of the pathogen. We saw inflammation. So when you get a bruise on your knee and so forth, we studied how the mast cells are going to initiate the inflammation response by making antibodies. So there's increased blood flow, there's phagocytosis, increased permeability. That's why there's something leaking out of the bruise, like a plasma-like liquid. Clotting factors to make sure that you don't lose blood. So that is the inflammation reaction. Fever. So once the hypothalamus picks up the signal that there is a load of bacteria in the system, it will raise the body temperature. That's when you get a fever. That it's called pyrogens, elevation of the body temperature by pyrogens. And the reason for this is to accelerate the immune system and to accelerate metabolism in your body. So all these are examples of non-specific or innate immune system. Well, this is the most interesting. How does your body react specifically to a certain bacteria or virus or a pathogen? That is called adaptive immunity. This will take a while to develop in our body, up to 2 weeks. So here's a picture of a virus. See this hexagonal shape? And here this almost looks like a coronavirus. Coronavirus is a RNA virus, and here's a bacteria. So in adaptive immunity, the antigen, so all of them are considered, the foreign material is considered as an antigen because it's going to evoke the immune system. So the antigen triggers the immune system. It can either be a cell-mediated immunity through T cells being activated. So when the phagocytes chop up the antigen or the pathogen, it will present it to the T cell. And the T cell is going, once it's activated, it will find the pathogen, attack them, and it will get rid of them by chemical toxin or phagocytosis. It can also activate the B cells to differentiate to become a plasma cells and make antibodies that will tag the antigen for destruction. So it can either be cell mediated through T cells or antibody mediated through B cells. So some basic terminology is written on top here, but pay attention that T cells will provide cell mediated immunity to defend against abnormal cells and pathogens that are found inside the cell. B cells will provide antibody mediated and defense against antigens and pathogens that hang around in the body fluids outside the cell. So what happens is the T cells are not able to perceive the antigen or the threat that has happened. So the phagocytes and B cells, when they are infected, they will present a piece of the antigen on the cell surface membrane. So this is called antigen presenting cell. So there are two ways it can happen. So when a bacteria or virus infects a macrophage here, let's say it's a macrophage, and then the macrophage is chopping it up, and the endoplasmic reticulum will take a small piece of that polypeptide, package it in a protein called MHC, major histocompatibility protein class 1. And then it will pinch off in a Golgi vesicle, and then it will present itself on top. This the T cell can recognize. So now the T cell knows that the invader looks like this. So that is why it is called antigen presenting cell. Another way antigens can be presented. So here is a bacteria which is chopped up by lysosomes, and a piece of the bacteria is displayed by another protein complex called MHC class 2. So class 2 is presenting the antigen here. So there are two ways antigen can be presented: MHC1 and MHC class 2. Once they are presented, the T cells now know what the invader looks like. So we have an antigen that are bound to class 1 MHC protein. The T cell that is going to respond to this is called CD8 T cells. They can differentiate into either cytotoxic, memory, or suppressor cells. Cytotoxic T cells are the one they are going to destroy the invader. Memory T cells will hang around, have a memory of that invader, so that if they attack at a later time, they can get rid of it. Suppressor T cells are the regulators of the T cells. When a T cell encounters a MHC class 2 protein, the cell that is going to respond is called CD4 T cell. And this is the T cell that HIV infects. That's why it is so serious. So there are two ways T cells. There are two types of T cells for the two types of major histocompatibility proteins. And there are four different types of T cells that will take care of the invader. So how does the T cell help the B cell to make antibodies? So here is an inactive B cell. If it has to make antibodies specific for a specific antigen, it has to get sensitized, it has to get activated, and then it will differentiate into a plasma cell to make the antibodies. So here in the B cell, you can see the Y-shaped antibodies they are membrane-bound antibodies that are stuck to it. When they encounter the antigen, they will get sensitized. When they get sensitized, a T cell with the same antigen will activate it. When they get activated, they will differentiate to form plasma cells that will churn out thousands and thousands of antibodies that are specific to one antigen. So kindly do extra reading to understand what sensitization is, activation, and then how antibodies are made. So this whole process can take up to 2 weeks to happen. This is a typical structure of an antibody. It's an immunoglobulin. The one in purple is called as the heavy chain, and the region, so these are all polypeptides. The one in light blue is the light chain. So this region is variable. So depending on the antigen, the antibody can vary. There's like literally like thousands and thousands of possibilities of antibody structure. So this is the constant region and this is the variable region. Among all the classes of antibodies, IgG is the most common, that will account for 80% of all the antibodies that your body makes. And this is the one that gives you immunity against bacteria and viruses. So know the structure of the antibody. It's Y-shaped, made up of polypeptide chains. It has a variable region and a constant region. This is the summary slide that's showing like when your body is infected by a bacteria. This is the number of which cell shows up, and then this is time on the x-axis. So the first, anytime a bacteria invades your body, the first police officer that is going to show up on the screen are neutrophils, followed by natural killer cells. Then it's macrophages. So macrophages, after they do phagocytosis, they are going to do the antigen presenting here. That will trigger cytotoxic T cells. The B cells are activated and the plasma cells will start making the antibody. So this, for the antibody to be produced, it takes about 2 weeks. The next slide is a summary slide of the immune system activity that we spoke about for bacterial infection and virus infection. So that is the last slide. And there was a video I have, I'll include the video in the slide so that you can watch it at home. All right, questions? Thank you for, I'm like really impressed that you're like are still here. Isn't it so fascinating, the lymphatic system? Is there any questions?
Shit, hold on, my professor.
Grace, you have a question? Naya, Frank, Miranda? And sorry about earlier. I don't know what happened. So kindly watch the videos I have posted on Blackboard. So what is due this week? Discussion board posting is due. Visible body activity and the homework there is due. That's it. No more exams. You all did an excellent job on exam 2, as I said. I'll let you all go, okay? Bye.
Bye, Professor.
You don't
Bye.
have
Bye.
bye bye.
Bye.